In 18th century France, France was divided into three major estates, the first belonging to the clergy, the second belonging to nobles and aristocrats, and the third belonging to the peasants and middle class. The movie Marie Antoinette is based in the Palace of Versailles and shows the life of nobles and peasants. The following information is coming from this movie. Nobles in the movie lived an easy life and didn't have to do very much. They watched the royal family eat cake and showed loyalty to the royal family and everyone else in the Palace of Versailles. The nobles also had to attend all the meetings and occasions of the royal family. One of their major jobs was to serve the king and honor him for what he does. They are invited to royal get-togethers, royal breakfast, royal lunch, royal supper, and every other special occasion that were held in between these events. As they attended these occasions, they had to dress very religious and stable. Even though they didn't have the spotlight to talk, they had a bright mind, so to speak. They gave advice to the royal family and took daily ballet lessons in order to learn how to gesture gracefully in the presence of the king. In all, life as a noble was fairly easy. Peasants made up most of the population of French life. They lived in nice clean houses with all of their casualties provided. All of their vegetables and crops were prospering and growing very well. The workers in this peasant life were happy and smiling with nice clean houses and clean clothes. The peasant life seemed like an ideal way to live in the country. The nobles didn't really know what life was like for the peasants, as this was part of the problem. They thought no peasants had a reason to complain. Now it's time for some questions. Please click the corresponding annotation to select your answer. True or false? Did nobles in 18th century France live life as easily as the nobles did in the movie? The correct answer is false. As you know, the nobles were classified in the second state of the three estate generals. In the 18th century, however, the lives of nobles changed drastically. Now they had to fulfill certain duties and take on jobs that were given to them. Some of these duties that the nobles had to persevere through were military services and to always honor and serve their king. It was a great achievement for the nobles if they were able to correctly perform their duties, since they basically had no freedom because of every call and judgment was through Louis XIV. Louis XIV had to give an approval to the nobles before they did their duties or basically anything they did. The nobles in the movie were shown watching every move the royal family made from dusk to dawn, and they helped offer advice, and life for the nobles was fairly easy. But in the real world, as we know, they were forced to serve in the military most of the time. However, the king awarded them with great honor each time they accomplished a task he brought for them. With all the tasks that the nobles performed for Louis XIV, the nobles tried very hard to impress Louis XIV, as it would pay off very well for them. In conclusion, the nobles exemplified themselves as hard-working people at times, despite what was shown in the movie. The movie Marie Antoinette made the peasant life seem almost ideal. Is this real, or is this just a Hollywood fantasy? Click the corresponding annotation to select your answer. The correct answer is true. Life for peasants in 18th century France was considered brutal. The peasants made up majority of the population, yet had many inequalities, which was the reason that drove them to a change. One major inequality was the tax system. They had to pay taxes to the king, the church, and the lord of the manor. Not only this, but they also had to pay taxes to things such as wine, bread, and salt, barely leaving money to spare. The peasants earned their living as farmers, owning small plots of land that didn't produce enough food. For them, making money was hard. To do so, they worked many hours on the land. It was difficult because the peasants had no access to education, meaning they were illiterate. The nobles, on the other hand, had more power and values, and had the right to control the peasants. All of these inequalities provoked the peasants to rebel by opposing the nobles who used them. One class that was not talked about in the movie was the middle class. The middle class was part of the third estate and was mainly made of servants and tradespeople. Everybody who lived in the third estate was someone who didn't have the privileges to live in the first two. There are many groups of middle-class people in the third estate, the most common and vocal being the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie benefited the most from the revolution because of the investments they had made prior to it. The country changed around this time from being more agricultural based to industrialized. Despite this, they still had trouble becoming very wealthy because of the monopolies that kings and guilds held over businesses and products. The bourgeoisie were always wanting more for themselves to make them like the aristocrats, but like the rest of France, they were still blind to the peasants suffering all around them. The bourgeoisie slowly gained more power until some of the more influential bourgeoisie worked their way into the government. As the bourgeoisie began to gain more influence, and the people of the Third Estate of France began to get more restless, the king was forced to make something called the Estates General. Representatives from each estate would meet when the king called them and discuss problems. This was supposed to help stop the impending revolution. However, it didn't work as well as they had hoped, and the revolution happened.